Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Nothing But Bangers, aka MBB, aka Bangers, and welcome to another video where we're going to be recapping the top 16 decks, statistics on the top 16 decks, which might surprise you, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a shorter version of my experience in the tournament, including how I was able to get a little lucky and win this tournament. So let's just get straight to it. This is the first place deck that I used. It's a Venusaur and Egg deck. So basically the idea is you want to get Exeggutor out. You want to start applying pressure. While you're applying pressure with either Exeggutor or Exeggutor EX, you're building up your Venusaur or getting to your Venusaur line on the bench. Now, one of the things that I would also point out is there's a breakdown of 2 regular Exeggutors and 1 Exeggutor EX. The best case scenario is I'm making my opponent go through 2 Exeggutors that are just non-EXs, and then I'm closing out the game with Venusaur, with Erica's. And, that's just kind of the best case scenario. And, the matchups are pretty good for some of the aggro decks because, like, against a deck like a Pikachu EX, if I can survive the early game without giving up an EX knockout, it's very tough for them to chop down a Venusaur EX, especially if they're not playing something like a Raichu that does 140, suddenly, right? So that's the first place deck. Let's go to the second place deck, and these decks are going to be in order. So this is just regular, pretty much stock Gardevoir Mewtwo list, double potion and a red card, 1 Sabrina. And again, I have statistics for the trainers in just a second, but let me run through all these lists. You can screenshot them. That way you can go ahead and have them. Maybe you want to brew with them. Maybe you want to test them out. This is the Marowak and Sandslash list. The inclusion of Farfetch'd and Double Giovanni. Very spicy, along with the potion. Again, Farfetch'd is one of those Pokemon that's going to have a rough time against electric, but the rest of your deck should be pretty good against it. Very weak to grass. So, the only thing that scared me playing as a Venusaur and Egg player was seeing Farfetch'd turn 1, because I knew Farfetch'd turn 1 and Giovanni was good game for my execute. So tough matchup there when it happened. And I believe I did encounter a Farfetch'd turn 1 Giovanni exactly like I'm describing in the tournament. So if you haven't watched that video, you can skip through the different rounds to kind of see the different matchups and whatnot, and I go more in detail about why I chose Venusaur and Exeggutor. This is another Mewtwo list in top 4. This Mewtwo list in top 4 basically was a little bit greedier. I mentioned this in my matchup because I played, I think, 3 Mewtwo's in my top 16 run. But this is the more greedy list, right? It's playing Meowth, so that way you can draw cards, hopefully get to the engine, get to the Gardevoir line faster, and then it's playing 1 red card and 1 Sabrina, as well as 1 Giovanni. So a little bit of a mix-up with the trainers. All right, now this is the top 8 decks. So this is going into 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th place. This was the Charizard deck that I had to go up against, and I've seen some people talk about how like my matchup was lucky and whatnot, and what I would say is like Charizard Moltres is very coin flip dependent already, and on top of that you also have to open Moltres and Charmander on the bench ideally. So my whole thing going into this matchup was I just hope that they don't coin flip me, because if they coin flip me I'm probably going to lose anyways, right? If you're flipping heads, you're probably going to win anyways. So I was hoping to avoid them flipping a lot of heads, and then I was hoping to avoid the Charizard and Moltres opener, or the Charmander and Moltres opener as much as possible. But they've got double red card in here, double potion to extend the life of their Pokemon, and then double Sabrina so they can snipe things if needed. But again, this was the fact that I was able to go up against a fire deck and actually win was insane. Again, I did donk them in one game by basically saying, hey, your deck only runs 4 basics. I was able to get to the KO before you got to your second basic. That's pretty much just the way it is. But I was actually, when you look at the Venusaur and Charizard matchup, the one thing I would also point out is Erica is almost dead, as opposed to the Blaine's deck that has, Ninetales and, can have Magmar and Rapidash. That deck, like my Erica, actually gets value. So It's a tough call which one I'd rather face. Honestly, I was hoping to avoid any fire decks, as I mentioned in my other video where I kind of explained the deck choice. So this is the Pikachu EX deck. What's interesting about this deck, and I believe I might have played this person throughout Swiss, if I remember right. So they only run 6 basics. So 6 basics. So, the chances that their Pikachu EX is able to start attacking for 90 on their turn 2 it's a little bit lower than some of those other decks that play 7 basics and higher. But looking at this deck, the Surge and Raichu is very, very burst worthy. It's very good when it goes off. And again, double potion to extend the life of their Pokemon, but no Zeb Sniper. Zeb Sniper from Sarah's list, the previous tournament where they went undefeated in Swiss. Double Sabrina and double Giovanni in this list as well. Pretty interesting. All right, going into another Pikachu deck. This Pikachu deck chose to go with a split of the Zapdos, so one EX, one non-EX, and then they also went with Electrode as opposed to Zeb Sniper or Raichu. Then when you look at their supporters and trainers, they got one red card in here, double potion, double Sabrina, so they're able to snipe things out, bring it back out, and then Giovanni to hopefully get their damage on time. I think this is the last deck of top 8. This was the Blaine's list that made top 8. So again, this is a very, very cool deck. No EXs, so it's a single prize deck. So they're not dependent on the Moltres coin flips and then hoping that they can switch out of that Moltres and get into their other attackers. They're basically saying, hey, we're going to try to get to our Evo lines, as fast as possible. We're going to go ahead and try to Blaine you to get our damage and then knock you out. And we're trading 1 prize for 2 prizes if we can, right? So very cool deck. Blaine's deck, again, very solid. Very good, deck, especially for people that may be, looking to build a budget deck. Obviously, the big mismatches are going to be water, because but the thing is, if they're flipping heads and playing Misty, they're probably going to win, no matter what deck you're playing. So the other thing I would also say is I think Blaine might have a favorable matchup going into Mewtwo. I've played a very limited amount of games and I've kind of asked around, but I think that Blaine might have a good matchup going into Mewtwo. I think that actually might be the case. And it just comes down to them being able to two-shot the Mewtwo and get chip damage on Mewtwo very early. That's very significant. So, it overkills through potion, and sometimes it even overkills through double potion on their Mewtwo. So very interesting there. All right, so getting into some more of the decks rounding out the top 16. So this is another Mewtwo and Gardevoir list. Again, this is just pretty stock, right? Pretty basic. Might even be identical to the list that won the previous tournament. Then another Mewtwo and Gardevoir deck. Again, this was Mewtwo and Pikachu made up 50% of the decks that were in this 128 person tournament. So 50% of the field was either Pikachu or Mewtwo. So if your deck could not beat Pikachu and Mewtwo consistently, you probably didn't do too well in this tournament. So, in your preparation for the next event, that's something to keep in mind. How's my deck doing against, obviously water, if they're flipping heads, I'm probably going to lose anyways. But how's my deck doing against Mewtwo, Gardevoir, and also Pikachu EX? Again, another Mewtwo, Gardevoir deck. You'll notice there's some slight variations between the amount of red cards and Sabrina's. And then, if they're playing Giovanni or not. And then going into the next deck out of this top 16. So this is going to be, one of those Pikachu EX decks. I was playing double Voltorb, double Zapdos EX. 1 red card, double potion, double XP, double Sabrina, and then a Giovanni as well to try and fix their damage. So no Surge in this deck, no Zeb Sniper, which is really interesting. This is a deck that a Pikachu EX deck that actually decided to play Voltorb as well as the Zeb Sniper package. So they're pretty light on supporters. Only 4 supporters in their entire deck. And a lot of Pokemon. So this deck is going to be very consistent at filling its bench, so that way Pikachu can start doing the max damage possible. And that's kind of one of the big differences between these Pikachu EX decks. Personally, I like the Raichu decks just because I've been on the other side of getting surprised by that 140. Personally, again, I think Zeb Sniper is the way to go, and I think Raichu is the way to go. That's just my opinion, though. And one other thing I would point out about this deck, they only played one X speed because they played double Electrode, and double Electrode, those have free retreat. So just something to point out there. And then this is the last deck that I'll cover in top 16 before I get into the statistics. So this is going to be another stock list with Mewtwo Gardevoir, double red card here, and double Giovanni are probably the spiciest things, and then no Sabrina. So they're just basically saying it doesn't matter what you bring out. I'm going to one-shot it with Mewtwo, or I'm going to red card you to cut off your line so you're not able to get out those big, bulky Pokemon. So before I get into the statistics, I just want to say thank you guys for watching. The viewership has been incredible. I can't thank you enough. I would really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. You can hit it, the logo on the bottom right of the video. That helps me a lot. And then obviously when you guys comment, that helps tremendously too. Thank you guys for taking time out of your day. It means so much that you guys are even watching my content. So let's get to the statistics of these decks. All right, so I've got the bracket at the top of the screen. So just in case you want to screenshot it, so that way you can kind of take a closer look at the paths that some of these decks had to take. But I've also got matchup details for all of these decks, so that way you can kind of have an idea of what they played against in the top 16. So let's just get straight into the data, because I know some of you will love seeing this. But looking at the top 16, there were 10 players that brought red card, and there was a total of 13 copies, with 3 players bringing 2 copies. When you take a look at Giovanni in the top 16, 13 players brought Giovanni, and there were a total of 18 copies, with 5 players bringing 2. Sabrina had 15 players. Again, the only player that didn't bring it was that Mewtwo player. There were 24 total copies, with 9 players bringing 2. When you look at Potion, 14 players brought Potion. There were 27 copies, and 13 players brought 2. Now, I would add an asterisk to this. My deck, the Venusaur deck, the only grass deck, it played 2 Erica. So I was basically playing Potion, but it was turbocharged, right? And then lastly, X-Speed had 16 players for a total of 29 copies, and 13 players brought 2. Now, let's get into the top 8, and you'll see something trending with red card, kind of similar to the last tournament as well. But in top 8, there were 4 players that brought red card. There were 5 total copies, and 1 player brought 2. There was 6 players that brought Giovanni for a total of 9 copies. 3 players brought 2. Sabrina, there were 8 players that brought Sabrina. There were 13 total copies, with 5 players that brought 3. Potion, 6 players out of the 8. And again, I played Erica, so basically 7 players. We're bringing a heal factor to the deck. There were a total of 11 copies of Potion, and there were 5 players that brought 2. X-Speed, all 8 players brought X-Speed. There were 15 total copies. 7 brought 2. So almost everybody brought 2 copies of X-Speed. All right, let's get to the top 4. So in top 4, 2 players brought red card, and then there were 2 copies of red card. So every round of the top cut had red card, is basically what I'm kind of alluding to here. Giovanni, 3 players out of the 4 brought Giovanni. There were 5 total copies, so I was the only player that did not bring Giovanni in top 4. All 4 players brought Sabrina, and there were 5 total copies. For Potion, 3 players brought Potion, and again, I brought Erica, so that's basically all 4 players were playing a form of Hill. Then when you take a look at X-Speed, 4 players brought X-Speed. Looking at top 2, and this was just another Mewtwo versus Venusaur matchup. 1 player brought red card, 1 player brought Giovanni, both players brought Sabrina, 1 player brought Potion, and then both players brought X-Speed. Now, looking at the matchups, this is some interesting data. Okay, so let's talk about this as well as far as matchup data. Mewtwo went 2-1 against Pikachu EX decks. Mewtwo went 0-3 against Venusaur decks. And by the way, in Swiss, I went 1-2 against Mewtwo decks. 1-2. So that's just the data that I can give you. I think I was the only player playing Venusaur. I don't know, maybe there's another. I didn't look through every single deck list. Mewtwo went 1-1 against Blaine. Mewtwo went 1-1 against Marowak. Mewtwo went 0-1 against Charizard. And then in the Mewtwo Mirror, obviously a Mewtwo won. Pikachu went 0-2 against Marowak, which makes sense. Pikachu went 1-0 against Greninja / Water Deck, which again makes sense. And then Venusaur went 1-0 against Charizard, which makes no sense. But again, there can be some luck that kind of, throws that game or throws that matchup into either player's favor, right? If Charizard's flipping heads, they're probably going to win. If Venusaur is avoiding the opener where they go, Moltres active, Charmander bench, then, they have a shot to actually win the game. Overall, Mewtwo went 4-7 in the top 16 and on. Pikachu went 2-4 overall. Venusaur went 4-0. Marowak went 3-1, and Charizard went 1-1. So take from that what you will. I hope that the data kind of helps you as you move forward. In summary, I just kind of want to say this. I appreciate all the support, all the people that have been kind of reaching out and saying, good job. And, it's been really cool to see people running into Venusaur and Exeggutor on the ladder a lot more often. If I could pick one thing about how I impact this game, it's not necessarily with one deck. I would love to say that, at the end of the day, I changed or helped change the way that people play cards like Professor's Research, asking themselves, does this progress my game state, or should I just hold on to this Professor Research? I also hope that I kind of change the way that people play the card, red card, and I hope that I can help change the way that people, play around red card. And if you watch my gameplay, you can kind of point it, you can see the examples that I'm talking about, but it's really cool to say that, hey, in the early inception of this game, I was able to, at least give a deck that a lot of people were able to take and play. Is it a good call for the next tournament? Honestly, look, I think that my run in this tournament was it was a good meta call, and I had good draws when I needed them. I had good coin flips when I needed them. Because at the beginning of the tournament, I had some tough draws, some tough coin flips. At the end of the tournament, I had to play well, but I also had to get some good coin flips. And, I had to be able to, squeeze out some games that, I probably, would lose in a lot of other situations. So, I don't know that Venusaur is the answer to the next tournament, but I do know this. It has a great matchup against some of the decks. If you can make it to the mid game, if you can make it to the late game and not have given up an EX prize. So I hope this helps. And there should be some videos that are getting ready to pop up right now. I would appreciate you watching them. And as always, I thank you for taking time out of your day to watch my content. It really means a lot. Let me know what you think is the best deck for the tournament that is coming up. And I would love to hear your thoughts. And until next time, I'll catch you later.